Can you guys all see my screen? Nod if you can. Okay, great. Thank you. So the median sold price, now this is Reno alone. So a lot of times our stats, we have Reno and Sparks combined. So we have a separate one for Sparks. The median sold price is 485. Does anyone think that's kind of high? I do. I think it's really high. So we are, and it's still going up. It's up 5.4% from last month. Units sold 435. That's not a number that a lot of you guys are fluid with unless you're a real estate agent, but our inventory is at an all-time low. We have about half of a month worth of inventory. So if anyone's familiar with absorption rate, that's really nothing. So if nothing new comes on the market, it'll take a half a month, 2 weeks for us to saturate everything that's on the market. Price per square foot average for Reno is $259. I'm sorry, if anyone's looking at Robert, he kind of comes and goes and disappears into the baseball screen. The new listings, 409. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen going into the winter time. Usually we lower our numbers lower. And, you know, median sold price will go down a little bit. Usually the active inventory will go down. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but right now there's still a huge market of buyers that are looking, even though we're running into middle of November. So not exactly sure what's going to happen there. Let's see. So I wanted to pull up that one. Oh, I have them right here, don't I? Okay, sorry guys. I don't want to look at those though. Okay, sorry. So here's the Sparks market, a little better. Median sold price 412. Active inventory 60. Not very many. Days to contract 21 days or less. So that is quite an indicator. And then going into the Fernley market, median sold price 318. I've not seen it that high in a really long time or ever. I don't know. What do you think, John? Crazy. Active inventory 52. So we're seeing $500,000 homes going up in Fernley, and they're not having any problem getting them sold. So days to contract 28 days. Just a little bit of information on the market, and maybe Carrie will chime in since he's a fellow agent. I love to get other people in talking about the market with me. Carrie, if you want to unmute yourself, I don't know how you feel about it. You want to give your opinion on the market and what's going on with it? What's been your experience?
So things have been hot and continue to be so for myself. And everybody I know around me, same thing. The only thing that is a little bit of an indicator, I don't know if it speaks to anything at all, would be when I'm talking to local inspectors, they're saying that it's starting to slump off a little bit in their bookings.
Okay.
So since they're kind of one of the front runners, I mean, obviously we have our data for when something goes into contract, but the inspectors that I have talked to recently say that they have a lot more availability, and that you know, you'd expect that be one of the first phone calls that gets booked out right after going into contract. That's all I got.
Okay. Hey, Rudy has a question for us. Go ahead, Rudy. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I did. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So just a clarification question. So all this active inventory, this is only single home?
These are only single family homes, yes. So when we're trying to pull information, we have to have a certain amount of data for the information to be a good indicator. And so you're probably, my guess is you're wondering what's going on with multifamily. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. We should probably pull in that data. Maybe I could do that for you guys and show you guys on the tail end. So basically an APOD, it typically consists of a one-page document used to evaluate a rental property's income and expenses. Income and expenses projected for the first year of ownership, typically. There's other ones. I don't know, can they see this on my screen? What do you see on my screen? You do? Okay. So perfect. So how many people have seen this before? Yeah. Okay. So Carrie's thumbs up. He's seen it. All right. Awesome. Jim's got his thumb up. We don't see Jim's face. He must be in his pajamas. Awesome. Good job, guys. Okay. So this is one of the tools that John uses on a regular basis and most investors do. This is one version. There's all kinds of different versions. This is the one that I think RSAR, Reno Sparks Association of Realtors, has provided to us. So that's the one that, thank you, Anthony, for uploading that and getting that in the system. Did you upload that into the chat too? So everyone has a copy? Awesome. All right. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to give up the share to our friend John. John Spinola, most of you guys know him. I don't know too many of you guys who don't know him. If you guys haven't been live to our investor group, I'm going to actually kind of start peeking him into the screen here. But John's been with us since the beginning, since the first meeting. Is that right? Okay. So he's been with us. Okay. So yeah. So Jack and Jack from Dixon Realty. What's Jack's last name? Dang it. I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, Jack from Dixon Realty and I started this meetup once upon a time about 6 years ago. I believe John was present at the first meeting, and he's been coming ever since. And he's been a plethora of information and knowledge and wisdom. And I think he tells funny jokes. He says he doesn't know any jokes, but he's always keeping me laughing. So without further ado, John, what I'd like to do is turn this over to you. I'm going to stop the share on my screen here. And
Hey, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Or do I need to turn my speaker up?
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, good. This is kind of uncomfortable for me, not having any audience for feedback. But I went through my computer and found several items that I use, and I lost them already.
I can share my.
No, I got it. So we'll go through the APOD on a couple of different things, but I've got how to analyze a deal is just a list I put together. It's already open. Okay, there's a lot of ways that people look at transactions to achieve a value, and you've probably heard of some of these, and some of them you haven't. These all are in order of the least information, I guess would be the easiest way to put it, to the most information. So price per square foot is pretty simple. Take the total price and divide it by the number of square feet. So if you had a 1,000 square foot property and it was $100,000, you divide 1,000 into the 100,000, it'd be $1,000 a square foot. $100 a square foot, I'll be all right. So it's just a rule of thumb. All these are good indicators of value if you're comparing like stuff. So if you're comparing Midtown price per square foot on similar properties, that's probably a good ballpark indicator. If you're comparing price per square foot between Midtown and Red Rock, probably not so good. So, and again, these are usually used mostly for commercial properties or multi-units. Price per unit, you've probably seen that in the multifamily. So be, $100 a door or $1,000 a door, or the prices are pretty crazy, but it's so you basically divide the price by the number of units.
Sure.
Oh, I just need to share it.
Yeah.
No one else can see this?
Nope.
This
Anthony, can you help?
this is new to me. Oh, I just need to get on.
I don't know.
To,
Let me share it.
clear screen.
Sure.
Sorry about that. New to me here. So price per square foot, price per unit, and Anthony can send this out along with some other stuff that I have. Gross rent multiplier used to be really big in California. You take the total gross rents and whatever the multiple is to make the price. So if total gross rent's $100, and the price is 1,000, then it'd be a gross rent multiplier of 10. Don't find that used much anymore, at least not in, and some of the stuff is used more in different areas of the country. Like I said, California used to use this all the time. Not so much anymore. Cap rate, probably all heard the term. Cap rate, the simple explanation for it is a little rhyme. You divide what you made by what you paid. So pretty simple. So if I made, I probably should have done examples here rather than try and think of them and do math in my head. But if you made $100 and you paid $1,000, that's 10%. So that'd be a 10 cap. Cap rates are similar to, it's a return on investment. So it's like if a bank's going to pay you 5%, first off, call and tell me where it is. But so that's their rate of return. So this is your rate of return after your net operating income. Net operating income is kind of the gold standard of how you figure out what a property is worth. Net operating income is the operating income after you subtract the vacancies and all expenses. It has nothing to do with mortgage. So cap rates are figured as if you own the property free and clear or you bought it for all cash. So your cash on cash return and the cap rate will be the same if you paid cash for the property. Very common. Everybody kind of uses it a rule of thumb. Again, it takes in, it's a better indicator of value than gross rent multiplier or price per square foot. Gross rent multiplier at least looks at the rents. The price per square foot doesn't look at anything except the square foot of the building. The price per unit is similar to price per square foot. It just tells you how it doesn't have anything to do with income. The first one that has anything to do with income is gross rent multiplier. Cap rate has a little more information because it's actually taking into account the expenses. So the cash on cash is the net cash received by the cash invested. So this includes mortgage payments. So can't keep this stuff in here. Get rid of this. Sorry about that. Cash on cash, it's net cash received. So that's going to take into account your mortgage. So it's going to be all your expenses, your vacancy, everything else, including mortgage payments. And so it's how much are you making on the total cash invested. So this takes into account one more item, which is mortgage. cash flow before taxes is the same as cash on cash. Scroll this. I need to get over. There you go. Okay. Cash on equity. I really like to do this one. Most people avoid it. Cash on equity is a percentage. In other words, how much money am I making on my equity? People will tell you I'm making, 30% cash on cash because I bought it 25 years ago and it's appreciated. The price has tripled. But really, if you look at it and say, how much equity, in other words, if I sold that, how much cash, in theory, could I have? So the cash on equity reflects your actual rate of return on not only the cash you have in the property, but also the equity that you've either created by adding value to the property or the economy or the change in people recently have seen their equity, at least on paper, go way up. So cash on equity, you'll find out, last time I did mine, I think it was 3% or something, because I tend to hang on to property for a while. But I think it's a more realistic way to look at your investments. Cash flow after taxes, obviously that's going to change for each person. So this gives you an idea of where it sits for you. So it's net, what's left in your pocket after the government takes their hand out. So internal rate of return, I put don't worry about it, but it's what people like the CCIM, they'll do a 5-year projection. Internal rate of return basically takes the income from the property as it comes in and the expenses as it comes in. So in other words, if I spend $1,000 extra on a roof in February, that would show a negative there, and I get an extra or a tenant leaves, that would be a negative, or increase the rent. So it calculates that as an internal rate of return. So if you want to do the math, it's an interesting way to do it. They normally do 5-year projections. I have a tough time doing 1-year projections. So that's just a little an interesting way to look at or way people look at properties and value them. So, good golly, I managed to get there. How much time do we have?
Oh, we got all night.
We got all night.
If it takes till midnight, John, we got it.
Okay. This is I just did that one. Try again. How to analyze a deal. So this was my partner and I put this together. I was teaching a class and tried to figure out if we're looking at a deal, what's important. In other words, if I'm looking at a property, what's important? So obviously, cash flow is important. We call it a direct cap. In other words, what's the actual cap rate? Appreciation, is there value increase? Something that we can do to add value to the property? Is there vacancies up or down? what can I do to the property to increase the yield? So, and that's going to be different with every property. If I'm buying stuff that needs a lot of work that I can increase the value on, that's something that that you would add that into your yield side to try and figure out if you really want to do the property or not. Financing, always a key. Is it assumable? So assumable are not as common as they used to be. So way back when, for $50, we used to be able to assume government loans. So $50, walk in and take over property. Should have bought a lot more of them. But anyhow, can you get seller carry? So it's a great way to make properties work that don't work. We bought a property that we rehabbed recently, and we got the seller to carry back 85% or 90%
Wow.
loan at, I think we're at 3.5%, 30 years, due in 10. So, ask. Most people, a lot of times you don't get the deal because you don't ask. Costs nothing to ask and explain why it might be a better thing for the seller to carry rather than take the cash. It spreads out his tax basis, in other words, his taxes, because he only pays for the income as it comes in. So he pays as the income comes in. Part of it will be return of his principal. Part of it will be interest. And part of it will be capital gains. So you can spread out his tax liability over a number of years rather than throwing it all in 1 year. How easy is it to secure new conventional financing? Right now, try and finance a restaurant. Try and finance a gym. You won't be able to. Or if you do, the rates will make it unreasonable. Try and finance apartments. Everybody's looking for those. Try and finance an SBA loan, government guaranteed. Try and finance USDA, Department of Agriculture. They're 80% guaranteed. If you're anywhere near reasonable financially, banks will stumble all over themselves to get that. The government guarantees 80% back to the banks, and the most they can possibly lose is 20% of the value of the property, zero. What kind of interest rate? Same thing, interest rate on single-family homes, owner-occupied. They still in the twos, 2-3%. It doesn't seem like that long ago when we thought anything under double digits was a good rate. Now people getting used to 2%. If this jumps to 3, they're going to be waiting for it to come back down. What kind of amortization? So can I get a 30-year AM or a 40-year AM? There's some Fannie Mae loans that are available that have 40-year AMs. So what that does is it stretches, it gives you more cash flow up front. You pay more in interest, but you're paying interest with tomorrow's dollars. 30 years, 40 years out, what's a dollar going to be worth? Are we going to have a dollar? So the amortization period makes a lot of difference. If you got a 2% mortgage and it's due in 6 months, maybe that's not such a good deal. So which goes to the next item, what's the term? So do we have a call? How far out is it? Leases and occupancy. again, who are the tenants? So are the tenants, are they taking good care of the property? Have they been paying for a while? You know, are they suitable for the market? You know, is that, or are they a one-off? Are they in a business that's out of favor for whatever reason? What's the term of the lease? Leases are interesting. They can make or break up a property. I tried to buy a bar probably 10 or 15 years ago. Great deal. Talked to the lady who owned it for 30 years or something. We had terms worked out. Said, let me see the leases. Well, because it was way under leased, and the lease was 20-year lease, and he had a first right of refusal, no increases. Made absolutely no sense at all. She just ruined the value of the building. So again, look at it. What are the increases? Many leases will have, they call them 1% or 2% a year or 3% a year increases. So you're going to keep up, hopefully keep up with inflation.
Let me know when you're open for questions.
Anytime.
So Isabel's asking, is it smarter to put less percent down payment on multiple properties or a large down payment on one?
Part of that's personal, and part of it depends on the property. I don't mean to dodge the question, but the property itself has something to do with it. But if you want to buy all cash, basically a large down payment, or you've got more at risk, but you have less leverage. So if you pay cash for a property and the market went up 10%, you'd make your value of your property would be 10% more than the cash you had in it. So if you paid $1,000 and it went up 10%, it would now be worth $1,100. If you were able to get it for 10% down and it went up $100, you've now made 100% on your money. So leverage cuts both ways if it goes negative. But what are your objectives? If you're just looking for something to send you a check every month, and you're not really interested in increasing, the value of your property, but have being able to sleep at night, I guess would be the thing. You'd be pretty safe owning it free and clear. So I'm not sure if that answered your question. I think I walked all around it, but
Isabel,
the real answer is it depends.
Isabel, if you want to unmute yourself, if you want to expand on that, or if you want to let us know if he answered your question.
It seems pretty clear that it really depends on the property and who's borrowing. So
Okay.
I guess I would want to know if there's a way to compare, if there's formulas that I could compare to.
The formulas just tell you what each property will make.
Mm-hmm.
Project, but and so you can figure out what you're going to make and how much you got invested, and that'll tell you your rate of return.
Got it.
So,
Just to be clear, so like the less money you put down, the higher likelihood of making a better return on your investment. Am I correct on that? Your ROI?
You're better leverage, but also the higher risk you're at. So if something goes sideways, if you're highly leveraged and you've got several units in a building and one tenant leaves for whatever reason, you may have to reach in your own pocket to make payments. So it cuts both ways. So it's individual, and you can play with the numbers, but whatever you're comfortable with. Some people couldn't. My brother couldn't sleep at night if he had the kind of leverage that I use. And I look at his, and he's very safe, and he's very comfortable. And some days I think, why didn't I do that? but so it's what you're comfortable with, then too. So
That was the only question.
I forgot where we were. Let's see, loan to value, interest rates. There we are. Leases and occupancy. Who are the tenants? What's the history of the tenant? In other words, has he been there for 10 years, or did he move in last week? Is he the brother-in-law of the guy who's selling it to us, and he's got an 8-year lease with no increases and under market already? So who are they? Are they good for the local, suitable for the local market? What's the lease term? The lease term cuts both ways. Everyone wants somebody with a 5-year lease, but if it doesn't have any increases or it's already under market, you may well like a shorter lease. So in a rising market where there's no vacancies, sound familiar? Would be really nice in this market to have maybe 1-year leases where you can adjust them every year. In a market that is not so good, I think 2008. So if the guy's going to still be in business, it'd be really nice to have a triple net lease with a credit tenant. Credit tenant means that they've got make you think like somebody that be listed on the stock market. Lots of assets, lots of cash. But you'd like to have somebody like that with a 5 or a 10-year lease with 2% escalations and that type of thing. What are the increases? Do we have the 3% a year or whatever? What kind of options do they have? Do they have a 5-year lease with 2 5-year options? So the options tell you what they can do, not necessarily what they will do. But if they've got options, it gives you an idea that they may want to, they're looking to the future to stay. Expense recovery basis is basically a way to depreciate property. So rather than we think of 30-year depreciation or 27.5-year depreciation, but I can take the property and have a company do a survey, and they say, well, okay, the carpet on the floor is only going to last 5 years, and the wiring in the building, believe it or not, they depreciated the wiring. I did it on 2 buildings I've owned. So basically, you can end up with a lot more depreciation in the first few years, and a lot less later. If you're going to hold a building for a while, it's a good thing to do. If you plan on only holding it for a short time, it's probably not a good idea. You end up basically you're changing the nature of the property from real estate to personal property in order to do that. So that will come back to bite you if you sell it in a short period of time, because that all turns into recapture, which is right now 25%, and hang on to your hat going forward. Roof type and condition, big deal. So anybody, speak up anytime if you see anything here that's interesting or something that I didn't make clear. Like I said, it's really difficult to do for me. this way as opposed to being in a room and get some feedback. Physical improvements, what type of roof and what condition is it? A roof can just kill you. We just spent a couple of years ago about $40,000 redoing a roof on an industrial building we had. It wasn't that, it's 13,000 feet, which is a great deal actually. But usually figure somewhere between $6 a foot or $7 a foot. So it, depending on the roof and depending on how bad it is. So do you have to not only tear off the roof, but tear off the plywood underneath it. What's deferred maintenance? That's basically stuff that should have been done that wasn't done. So that was the roof that didn't get done. So we had a leak. So now we've got sheetrock inside is bad. We've got water running down the walls. We now have mold in the building. You know, normal stuff should have been painted 3 years ago. So you plug all these into your cost, what you're going to pay for the building. So if they've got the building for $300,000 or something, and you think that you're going to have to put a roof on it, you're going to do the rest additional maintenance on it when you buy it. I plug that into my cost. I figure another $300,000 plus another $100,000 for repairs. I'm really going to pay $400,000 for this property, and run my numbers against that. Market variables. This is a lot of it. This is a lot for retail properties actually, but it works for single family. Not single family, multifamily too. Corner's not important, obviously, for multifamily, but it's for retail. It's great. Corner lot, you get access from both sides. Is it mid-block? A little harder to get to.
You have some questions, John.
Shoot.
Dave is asking, John, we're not echoing, are we?
No.
Okay. John, what type of expenses to investors fail to account for in the deal model, both short and long term?
I think the biggest is capital cost. They don't take into account. They say, well, it's going to cost me, $10,000 to fix it, but they don't count that it's going to take them 3 months to get that done. And so all the money you have to spend on everything else to keep that thing going for 3 months. So the biggest thing that I think that people miss is the cost of money. What time, I guess.
Okay.
What
And
was
then
the question again?
just basically what type of expenses do investors fail to account for in the deal model?
That's probably the biggest one. They probably don't. I have a little theory with my friend and partner, and he's really good at estimating. And so I told him, yeah, we just need to take your estimate, double it, and add 20%, and we're probably close. So it's always going to take longer and cost more. Is all I can tell you.
Okay. And then Isabel Foley is asking, to those with experience, would you say that it's better to buy newer properties, 2010 and newer, versus old, due to repairs and cap, etc.?
What's your skill level? So if you're a guy that's going to go out or a girl that's going to go out and do your own repairs, you can probably do real well with older properties. You're going to have a few more repairs, and they're not as desirable. So there's not as much competition. You see the new stuff going up. People are clamoring for it, and you get into bidding wars. I used to like to walk into buildings and when I was doing single family, if I'd walk in the front door and my eyes would water because of the cat urine, I would say smells like money to me, because there's not many people going to even go, even consider that.
I actually have a funny story about that, if you don't mind if I share. It's really quick, I promise. So I was showing an investment property to some investors that come to our meetup, as a matter of fact. And I get into the basement. First we walk in and they're like, wow, Ginger, this one doesn't smell. And which was very unusual for the properties I showed them. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's see about downstairs. I get to downstairs and it smells like someone died. And I'm like, you guys, it smells down here. Well, they couldn't smell it. And I kind of feel like maybe they got used to the stinky smell. I'm not sure. I don't think I'll ever get used to it. Anyway, the next question, let's see. Was it to you? Jonathan says to use an APOD, but I use an APOD, but much prefer a P&L for more detail. Does John ask for more detail as well?
Well, you always, actually, when I'm trying to buy a property, I ask for a P&L, and I also ask for the last 2 or 3 years tax returns, because they may lie on their P&L, but they're probably not lying to the government as far as what their expenses are, because they're going to crank up every dollar they can for depreciation. So always ask for, Schedule E or 1065 or whatever when you're trying to buy an income property that's already operating.
I like that.
I should have mentioned that before, but yeah, always ask for a P&L and then ask for tax returns.
Bradley asked, what % of your rent do you typically put aside for capital costs?
Is the building new or old? It kind of depends on what kind of shape it's in. Older stuff, probably 6 or 7%, unless I see if it's going to need a roof in the next couple of years, then you gotta. I don't have a set percentage, I guess, but most people don't use 0 to just make it easy.
Okay.
I don't suggest you operate like most people. Always plug something in, because there's always something, something will break. Another trick is and we'll get into this when we get to the APOD, is take a look and see if the numbers make sense. So if I'm allowing $10,000 for expenses, for repairs, say, well, that sounds like a big number. Well, I've got 20 units. How much is that per unit per month? And you break that back down and it turns into very little money. So don't let the big numbers, especially if you've got multiple units, scare you, or not scare you, but lead you to complacency. I just try and break it down. If you got, if they put $1,000 out and there's 10 units, that's $100 a year. That's less than $10 a month per unit. Right? If I send a plumber in there, my budget for the year is shot. So, again, for commercials, any other questions?
There's one question that Rudy wanted to know. What's your biggest lesson that you learned being a real estate investor? So I'm guessing from maybe based on the topic that we're dealing with.
Actually, it's interesting. You learn to ask better questions. We had a property that we got tied up in Texas, and it's a long story, but basically, after we bought this gal out, she came back and sued us and said, okay, I didn't get enough. Anyhow, but we looked at the property, and it was going down. We had $300,000 invested in it as a note holder, and there was $250 first, and it was down to 15% occupancy, and we chased that 300,000 investment. The question we should have asked was, if somebody offered this property to me today, regardless, assuming I had no interest in it at all, for 250,000, would I buy it? And had we asked that question to start with, we would have cashed in our chips, say, well, we'll make it up on the next one. But so I think that was probably the biggest lesson that I learned, is to ask better questions. All right. Does it have a center median? Does the road have a center median? Why would that be important? Well, people, if you can't make a left turn into the property, you got to go down the street and around the block to get there. It's certainly not as desirable as if you have, a center turn lane and access to it. Traffic counts and flow. So, there's a breakfast side of the street. If you look at the fast food and the coffee places are normally on the way that people would go to work on that side of the street. So there's a lot of demographics that go into these people, like McDonald's and other people go into selecting a site. Market demographics, employment income, how much are people making? Does the place that I'm buying, does it fit the market? Was it a little hamburger stand and everybody there is making $300,000 a year and looking for high-end restaurants, or vice versa? What are the population trends? Are people moving into the area? And then after you do all this stuff, the last item you do is a gut check. Does it feel right? Yeah, it looks great, but it just doesn't feel right. Don't do it. So, any other questions at this point while I'm chasing the next item I can try and find?
What do you see street location affecting the most? Ability to sell, rent, rent dollar lower, type of tenant class?
No, well, you're looking at it for the health of the tenant, which is the health of you. So if it's easy access, a lot of traffic, and all that, your tenant's going to make money. If he makes money, you're not going to have any trouble paying the rent. So if there's a problem getting into it, trying to think of an example here in town where you basically can only get into it going one way. Just makes it very difficult. You cut that. People are basically lazy. If I can't make a left turn into the place, I'll go down the street and get a cup of coffee further down, which is why they try and make the breakfast side of the street, where you don't have to make a left turn. It's all on the way. So this is was 10 units, was a while ago, but it's 10 units in it's a boarding house basically, which is why the numbers are kind of screwy. And this is what I made. I made this on Excel.
Yeah.
So it's similar. It's an APOD that I use. So just going through it, price is $529, number of units, average rent. So the price per unit, which we talked about before, you take 10 units, divide it into 529, you end up with $52.9 a door. The gross scheduled rental income is $48,000. Divide that by the 10 by 12, and then by the 10 units, and that's where you end up with the 407. Average vacancy, I use 5%. You get a lot of people that use 0. There's nothing that's 100% full all the time, or almost nothing. I guess if you got a triple net lease for 30 years to to Bank of America, you're probably pretty safe. But for the kind of stuff that most of us deal with, there's going to be some vacancy. So plug it in there and be realistic about it. Plus other income. So if you had, if this had a vending machine down here, or washer, dryer, or whatever, you plug that in. And that gives you your gross operating income. So that's the only thing that's taken into account is vacancy. Okay. Accounting and legal, that's probably light. Accounting, I spend $400 or $500 on LLC for accounting a year or more, depending on how complex it is. Advertising and license. This guy said all I ever did was plant a sign in the yard and word of mouth, and we filled it up all the time. So maybe that's true. But LLC fees were $350 a year. They went up to $380 or not. So plug in your fees there for license. If you need a special license for what you're doing, plug it in there. A lot of people forget about that. The more stuff you get on this list, the easier it is to come up with a for real number. Property insurance, I got that. Get a copy of the insurance policy. Get his checkbook. Get the return, or call your own if you're going into it at a higher price. Get your insurance agent to give you a excuse me, give you an estimate for insurance. This has got, normally you just have property management, have somebody like Robert do it. This guy had a guy on the property who took care of his management. He got 5%, and the manager you see down here took care of the lawn and the trash and kept the place cleaned up. So that's why that's in a different spot. He also put him on a 1099, so it didn't have workman's comp and all the rest of it. But there's slots for all that. If you've got a resident manager that you're paying a salary to, you need all that. Real estate taxes, we did that. Repairs and maintenance, that was from his expenses. So that was actual from his, not his APOD or not his, but from his tax return. Services, elevator, lawn, the manager took care of that, didn't have a pool. Rubbish, you can get that from the, I mean, some of these you can get real numbers on. I mean, you can call, NV Energy and get what they're paying for utilities. You can call the garbage company, find out what it costs to pick that up. A lot of these, you can find out for real what the insurance is. If you're gonna, the repairs and maintenance, they can fudge or they can not do them. We call deferred maintenance. Supplies, this again was off his sheet. That came from the power company, utilities. Gas and oil, there isn't any. Was all electric. Sewer and water, again, that's right off the bills. Miscellaneous replacements, I used $500, which is probably way low. Total operating expenses. For properties where you're paying, this is kind of unique because it's one building. So all, the hot water, and that's why the utilities are so high. there's no way to split them out. So miscellaneous replacements, 500 is probably low. As a percentage, 1% probably won't work. But again, I probably should have adjusted that. Total operating expenses, always look at the percentage. I do a thumbnail, what I want to say, guesstimate. And for most units, if you can keep it around 40%, you're doing pretty good. If you look in the, and if Robert's still out there, he can probably tell me if that's a good number or not. But I used 40%, and if I'm paying the utilities on a normal property, it's probably closer to 50%. And if you look in the MLS, you'll find them at 10 and 15%. And I like to tell people I really don't want your property, but I'd love to hire your manager if you can actually make that happen. I've had my expenses down to 25% real, but I did all my own maintenance. And I manage my own properties. So you can do that. Single families, you can, if they're newer and people take reasonable care of it, you can get well under that. But this is for multi-units. So this is the gold standard here, the net operating income. So we've got all our income, expenses, and hopefully we've got reasonable expenses. So our net operating income is $29,322.95. And then what I do is, I use annual debt service. So I actually figure out what the loan is. On this one, I figured loan amount is 423. I'm putting 105 down, which is 20%. Interest at 5%. My monthly payment is going to be $22.71, and annual payment is 27. So subtract the payment, my mortgage payment, from the annual income, and I'm making $2,000 before taxes on a $100,000 investment. So in theory, I'm making, not in theory, in actuality, I'm making 2% on my money. However, most people don't take into account your mortgage reduction. As part of your mortgage payment every month is basically, it's not money you can spend, but it's equity you're building. So $6,000 first year is actually not going to end up in my pocket. It's going to end up in the equity column. First year tax savings, the interest that you're paying on the loan is tax deductible, plus some depreciation. If this figures, and I can change this, there's 28% tax bracket. You'd have $4,000 worth of tax savings. That is cash, actually. You don't have to spend it. So the actual net income, with tax savings and mortgage reduction, is 12 grand, which is, now we're talking about a 12% or thereabouts cash on cash return. Changes it a little bit. Most people don't look at these other items. This is what kind of loan I've got, annual payment, the actual cap rate on the property. So if I paid cash for this property with that income, I would end up at 5.5% cap rate. My cash on cash, 2%, which we talked about before. Cash on cash, including taxes and mortgage, said just about 12%. Appreciation. A lot of people try and plug a number in here. In some property, I mean, in a house, you almost have to, but in income properties, the value of the property is based on the income. So unless I can find a way to increase the income or the cap rates people are willing to pay change, there really isn't any appreciation, in my opinion. So, but if you're looking at rents turning over every year, and you're in a market where you can bump them up 3%, you can plug that kind of number in here and do 3% a year. But you start running 3% against your big number, you can make this bottom number really scream. You get 30, 40, 50%. So that was a quick run through. Any questions on that?
Kind of a side question. I think Isabel was asking about LLCs and how they come into play, and if she should get one. And see, specifically, she said, at what point should I start an LLC?
Probably ought to find a property first. A lot of people run out and do a lot of LLCs, and you can set up an LLC for relatively inexpensively, meaning I think about $450 to for the state between your, and maybe you have a friend who might have one that's got a pretty good one. If you have to pay someone to do it, you're probably looking at, you probably get between $500 and $1,000. But there is, and actually I've got that brings us to our next, one of my other tabs here, which is, oh yeah, any other questions?
How do you calculate your mortgage reduction?
There's an amortization, I'll be all right, regular amortization schedule. You can do that on Excel, Microsoft, type into Google and just get an amortization schedule. You just plug it in and it'll calculate that. So you just go down a year. It'll do it by the month. So very easy.
And then Robert Hughes says we just set one up and it only cost us $375. So that's back to the LLC question.
Perfect.
And then Michael said, who do you use, lawyer or LegalZam? Who would you use, a lawyer or LegalZam? Or I'm guessing he's asking about LLCs.
Yeah, LLC. Initially I had a friend who had a lawyer draft one. So basically changed the name and used that document. That was pretty, spent a lot of money on that. So, so find someone who's doing a lot of them.
Yeah, and Jenna, I don't know how much she charges, but one of our speakers that came, I'll put that in the chat, some contact information. Jennifer Young, she's spoken at our group twice before. Actually, she was our first speaker when we went COVID, our first Zoom meeting. She was nice enough to volunteer to speak for our group. So I'll put that information in there. And Robert said we just did it ourselves. Robert, do you want to comment on that? You just recently did it. Do you want to unmute yourself? Are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, all we did is just go in and just set it up and do it ourselves through Silverflume, and then that hard. So
Okay, cool. While you're on,
but then again, we only did basically a single member LLC too. So if you're talking multi-member LLC, it may be a little more complicated. You might need some help for that.
This was just this is from a guy that I've bought numerous things from, but there's a sales pitch at the end, but basically tells you the different ways you can own property and what the advantages or disadvantages are. Sole proprietor, high IRS risk, no legal protection, no privacy, totally exposed, all profit subject to self-employment tax, limited tax-free benefit deductions, difficulty in deducting losses and other costly pitfalls. So probably not the best way. It's the highest risk way to own property, and we probably all start out that way because we don't know any better. Single member LLC. In Nevada, we actually have case law. In many states, single member is not considered, say, good protection for suits. So single member, some possible legal protection. Nevada's actually got case law. So it's a great place to do single member LLC.
Doug Rafferty is asking, for an LLC, does it have to be a true investment property? For example, can you house hack using an LLC? Wouldn't it be better just to get personal and umbrella insurance?
LLC is kind of a different purpose for if you're flipping house or you're house hacking. House hacking LLC might be worth the investment. Although I would certainly suggest that you do exactly what you're talking about, is get a good umbrella policy. But as an LLC, you have protection from, you can lose the house, but they can't come after you personally. So if you have Bill Gates slip and fall in your front yard, no amount of insurance that I could afford to carry would cover that. So if someone like that did sue you, obviously they'd win because they could spend more money on lawyers than I could. They could get the house, but that's all they could get. They couldn't get anything else. So that would basically, it separates you from it's a separate entity. So in that respect, I think that for any kind of investment property, it might be cheap insurance.
Okay. Did you have anything else to add to that, Doug, to your question? Did you want to unmute? Are you good?
What's up? Yeah, and then I just have a question on, so I've heard, and I'm going to try to articulate this correctly, but with LLCs, because like technically it's a business, like in order to purchase through an LLC, you have to have 2 years of funds that go through that as well. Like I'm just trying to think of from like a purchasing from the LLC standpoint, like as a business. Does that make sense?
An LLC, if I set up an LLC and go out to buy a piece of property and look for a loan, they're going to want me to sign on the loan because the LLC has no credit, no standing. As far as,
so the mortgage and the title are just separate, like the LLC is.
Yeah.
Got
so
it.
I can put the title into an LLC, put the property in an LLC. And if I could find someone there are lenders, if you've done it for a while, that will actually make a loan to the LLC. Because basically the LLC, the property is a real security. But normally they want a personal guarantee. So in other words, that not only do they want the property, but they want me to sign on the dotted line. So if the property doesn't cover the shortfall, then they can come after me.
I think one of the things you want to be aware of too is if you're getting title insurance on a property, is make sure that you're asking your escrow officer how that will affect you. If you do buy it, you know, with using your own personal name for lending and then transfer it into the LLC name.
Yeah, they're familiar with that.
All right.
Anything else? All right. Another way to own property is a regular partnership. Low IRS profile, but no legal protection at all. Partners are jointly and severally liable, not only for that particular property, but each other. So if my kid went over and ran over Bill Gates with his car, he could come after the property that I owned with Robert or with Ginger, and they would also be liable. So you really want to stay out of regular partnerships. So all profits from the partnership are subject to self-employment tax. So that's an extra 15%. So if you can turn that into an investment, a lot of times you can avoid that self-employment tax. So an LLC partnership is a limited LLC company that elects to be taxed as a partnership. When you set up an LLC, you can set it up and be taxed as an individual or as a partnership. So the profits are subject to self-employment tax, limited tax-free benefits. S corporation, legal protection, but all downhill from there. Higher IRS tax audit. Yeah. You have to take a W-2 salary. Dinged with payroll filings and hassles. It's although it works for, it was originally set up for professionals. S corp was single individuals, doctors, dentists, that kind of thing. Now you notice your doctor is probably in an LLC or an LLP, which is a limited liability partnership. So corporations, higher IRS audit. It's got a lot of benefits if you're big enough. You can pay medical expenses out of it. There's quite a bit of maneuvering you can do, but probably not for the little guy. There's a dollar amount that makes it, and I don't remember what that was, but it was way over what I needed to do. Talk to your CPA. And then he's got a special LLC partnership using Business Builder LLC system for $295, I think it is. So Anthony will send this out to you. If you're interested, we can, Aliello is the guy. Send me I just clipped this, but if you're interested, send me your name and email address and I'll send you all the information, or you can probably look them up online. Oh, this is is a copyrighted program, but it's really slick and it wouldn't take you too long. Sorry about that. I'm losing my ears. It wouldn't take you too long to recreate this in Excel. So acquisition, I don't know, 500,000. Gross potential rental income, $2.5 million. Get 50,000, probably get 50,000 gross, maybe.
Probably.
Probably should have taken one of those other vacancy and credit loss percentage, 3%. Fat fingered mistake. I pushed two dots and it said no, you can't do that. So gross operating income is 48.5. Total expenses. Now here you can just, which is kind of neat. I like. If I have a for real number, I can plug it in here, or I can say that's on that property. I can do 35% expenses. Okay, was 35% expenses. That was the desired cap rate was 10%. Its actual is 6.3. So what in order to get a 10% cap rate on those numbers, I would have to buy it for $315,000. Okay, the neat part about this is we can get cap rates back to around here, 6 cap. Okay, in this case with a 6 cap and the actual 6.3, I could, for my cap rate, I could actually buy it for $525,000. So the neat part about this is you copy and then say, okay, well, what if I could raise my rent 10%, 55, leave everything else the same. It's a 6.9 cap, and if I could pay $578,000 for it and still get at a 6 cap. So this allows you to play with your expenses. Copy it again, and let's see if I can get my expenses down because I'm a really good manager. I got Robert managing for me, and we can only do 28% expenses. I got a 7.7 cap. But you can see what just that quick, but it's all based on what it's really based on is the net operating income. This number here, if I can get a for real number when I do my APOD, get me a for real net operating income number. And then this just rolls down to the next one. I can copy it again. But this is just quick and dirty. But it tells you real quickly, you can just plug in 6 numbers and see whether it's even worth looking at. You know, if they've got this for 800,000. Workout doesn't make any sense to me. Next. So it's just a real quick way, but the whole key to it is getting good numbers to start with. But then once you do that, you can take a look and say, okay, well, those units, Ginger says those units that are renting for $900, which I think is a whole bunch, should really be renting it for 12. and they're all coming due in the next 6 months. So if I plug that in there, I can see where I'd be. So pretty slick. Guy named Scott Shield. He teaches commercial property seminars all over the country, and he's actually a doer. He's probably making more money doing real estate than he does teaching. But 10 years ago or something, I spent $1,500 or $1,800 to do this thing. It was one of the best ones I've ever been to. Questions? But we tend to, when we know something, we tend to use a lot of slang, and we kind of run by stuff, and we assume everybody knows what we know. I tell people, talking to other people who are in this business, we don't know what we know. What I tell people, just assume that whatever industry you're in, that everyone is as competent as or understands the language.
Right.
So please don't hesitate to ask questions about terminology or what I'm talking about.
See any questions? You guys can unmute yourself too if you'd rather not type in the chat box. So, John, just to kind of get bring everything in together. So the APOD you use to get to your net operating income number, is that right? From what I'm understanding. And then you take that and you plug that into your opportunity evaluator, which, I mean, I know there's a bunch of spreadsheets you can use that are already in existence online, and you have this one, and I think this is great. I like the side-by-side comparison. And so I think, so just kind of knowing, gathering the information, doing your due diligence, and kind of through experience, you have an idea of what your number should be. I remember we were looking at an APOD that came up. I think I showed it, I don't know, it's probably like a year ago. And I had pulled it up on the big screen, and you said, well, I see a problem right away, because they were showing, obviously there was no management fees. They had no maintenance fees in their APOD. And so immediately you pulled that up because you look at APODs all the time. So you're like, well, yeah, I immediately see a problem. So they were showing that I don't even remember what they were showing their cap rate was, but it was off because they were missing some crucial numbers.
I'd say more than half of the small property shows zero management because the guy's managing it himself. And when I go back to them, I say, okay, here's the number that I got, which is kind of a neat thing to do, is you run your, if you can get in front of the owner, run your numbers using his numbers and adding the stuff that should be added. And say, well, I manage it myself. There is no management. I said, well, are you going to manage it for me? Well, no. Well, I got to have somebody do that. But if you can, and even with a realtor, if you can get the realtor, being a realtor myself, I talk to the realtor and I say, okay, I'd really like to buy this property, but here's numbers that I got, and it's a 3 cap, and I can't, you wouldn't sell your client a 3 cap, would you? Oh no, of course not. Well, show me where I screwed up here. Where is my error here? Let's sit down and go over these numbers and figure out.
Yeah.
And you can actually get them to argue, not knocking heads with it's worth this much, no, it's not. Let's fix it. Obviously, I missed something. I know you're not that, you don't say you're not that stupid to put in bad numbers, but I must have made a mistake somewhere. Show me where my mistake is. So
right.
So now you're arguing it's not a personal thing, it's a, let's go fix this.
Doug has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Doug.
Thanks, Ginger. For question on reserves, maybe a personal thing, but just curious for you, John. Obviously, vacancy holdback, is obviously a big thing for reserves if the property would be vacant. But up front, when you first purchase a property, obviously a lot of people toss 3 to 6 months, reserves that they like to hold. Do you use additional capital, maybe as a beginner investor? Would you hold additional capital that you have sitting in wherever you have it sitting, as kind of a 3 month, 4 month, you have that extra amount of reserves, and then on top of that, you just start adding your 7 or 8% of vacancy that you're holding back? Just curious on like an initial starting number of capital that you already have that you commit right up front instead of using for that next deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I was never smart enough to do that. I was always the guy who would go out and have 500 in my pocket and find a property for 700 and try and figure out how to get the other 200. One of my friends who I've done a couple of deals with, has known me for a long time, he said, "You're a ready, fire, aim guy." But so I've always had credit. I've never really laid away a whole bunch of cash. It seems like I've always been in a growing mode, which I really got clobbered in 08 because I was in that mode, like a lot of people. So I've always had access, I guess, whether it's through credit cards or ability to borrow money, or but I don't usually lay away a lot of cash. Yeah, I've got a lot more cash available now. But when I was growing, I didn't lay away a whole bunch of cash. I figured I could fix the problem. And I was a hands-on, did most of my own maintenance. So which made it easier. That can really kill you if you have to pay someone to pay a plumber $100 to replace a $10 flat in the toilet or something.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thanks. And I know everyone looks at things differently.
Yeah.
I know some people look at personal lines of credit, as well. That's like their reserves. That's their cash, if you will, and they just draw against that and hold fewer reserves than more. So I was just curious on your strategy there.
Yeah, it's a good question, and you're right. It's absolutely all personal, whatever you're comfortable with. We talked about my brother before. He'd be laying money away, and I'd be looking for the next deal. So.
The next question is Isabel Foley asks, do you think 1031 exchanges will be eliminated?
I'm sure that's one of the things you're going to try and go after. They have no idea what it'll do to the real estate market. There's been estimates of 60 or 70% of the transactions that happen now wouldn't happen. I know personally, if I exchanged, I'd hang on to the property forever. They look at it and say, well, look at all this money that moved from point A to point B into the next deal. A lot of it's not going to move because it doesn't make sense to, if they do away with it, to pay, especially if they owned it for a while, to end up paying 30 or 40% or more, because all the stuff that you've deducted for the last 20 years all comes back at 25%, and you don't have any cash to pay it. I mean, hopefully you've got some cash because the value of the property went up, but every year you've taken that 27.5-year deduction on that thing, and you saved that money, but you probably didn't put it in a savings account, probably done other stuff with it. So when you sell the property, all that, they call it recapture, basically government says, you lied to us. You said that this property was depreciating and it isn't worth anything, and now it's worth more. Give us our money back. By the way, we want 25%. You know, your tax bracket is going to be 25% for Lions to us or whatever. So it's, so not only do you pay on the capital gains that you made, assuming that it went out, but that other, and that money at least you've got getting cash, or you got a note, or you got something. But the other stuff you've already spent it. So if your property stayed even and you depreciated it down completely meaning, let's say it's 80-20, 20% was land, 80% was building use, you depreciated at 80%, you're going to pay taxes on that 80% and 25%. And you're not getting any cash in it, assuming the building didn't depreciate, which is highly unlikely. So I think if they do that, the real estate market's going to take quite a turn. But yeah, I wouldn't be looking for cash all over. They've done nothing but spend money. You know, a lot of us they had to, and then I'm sure that if Biden gets in there, that they've got so many programs going out, so much money, they're going to be trying to pick up taxes anywhere they can, and that's low-hanging fruit. So that's just one kid's opinion, by the way. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer.
And does anyone have any other questions? How are you doing on your presentation?
Pardon me?
How are you doing on your presentation?
I can just, I've got, well, we're almost, this I can do in 10 minutes. This is a property I looked at in Dayton, Ohio. This was last year. This was 90 units. And what had happened was somebody had bought it. They had rehabbed it, or rehabbed it, most of it, ran out of money, had a loan coming due. They were looking for a partner. So we were looking at going in and buying half of it. So $1.7 million, 90 units, average rent is $660. This was like last year or year before, so it isn't like it's changed in history. $19,000 a door. The income is at that is 712,000. So which is the 90 units times less vacancy, 6%. Effective rental income. Concessions, we were, I forgot what we were paying for. We were paying for something that was already done, I believe. Plus other income, I think they had some laundry. Operating income. So this is the same thing that we looked at with just bigger numbers, a couple of zeros stacked on the end of it. But advertising and legal, a little higher. There wasn't any licenses. I think this was for a fire permit or something. So property management, they were going to continue to manage it, 8%. Office staff, I forgot what they were doing. Real estate taxes, repairs and maintenance. This was from their numbers. This was a 1 year, needed $3,500 worth of painting, cleaning. Maintenance, pest inspections, ground maintenance, just a whole bunch more items, basically. But and I've got 15,000 here. The non-recurring means it's a one-time construction that we're doing one time. So
this is what's interesting about properties in the Midwest, or this kind of stuff. It's really inexpensive. Miscellaneous replacements, I used $100 a unit. So I got $9,000 on 90 units. Still not much money. Probably low. So total operating expenses, $328,000. Operating income. 308. The number up here was 636. Net operating income is 308. $500,000 cash. Loan amount is $1.2 million. This was 9.4% loan because it wasn't completed. It's going to be expensive. 25-year in, but cap rate. So if we paid cash for the property, we have a 18% return cap rate if it met these numbers. Oh, okay. How about if I sit up? I wasn't paying attention. So debt service, 124,000. So first year tax savings, $13,000. Putting back in my pocket, or not sending to the government. Debt income's 209. Cash out of pocket, $500,000. So here's the cap rate. Cash on cash return is 36, almost 37%. Return on investment, cash and cash plus mortgage reduction is 41%. And so this, we'd get half of this basically was our deal. And then they found cheaper money somewhere else. But stuff in the Midwest is a whole different ballgame. They don't get the appreciation that we get here or in the West, but their cap rates are considerably better. So anyhow, that was just, I thought that was an interesting one. So you never know what you'll find.
Does anyone have any questions for John? Go ahead and unmute if you have a question for him, or if one's getting their full questions in. All right, thanks for the answers, you guys. We're going to go ahead and end that.
I've got a comment to make on that. Is I tend to, I mean, I can do all the numbers and all this fancy stuff, but I used to say if I have to get my calculator out to figure if I'm going to make any money on this deal or not, there's not enough margin.
I like that.
So you want to, you know, figure it's going to cost more and take longer, and make sure you've got, try and make sure you've got enough capital, enough margin in to make it worthwhile.
We also wanted to give you the opportunity. We talked about 1031 exchanges. I know that you have a couple groups that meet. I know we're running into the holidays here pretty soon, but you have one that real estate agents can come to, and then you have just one that anyone can come to. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have 2 meetings. They're at, and I don't know how they may get COVID too here again. I did them when COVID first starting on Zoom, and I find this really difficult. Ginger seems to be pretty comfortable, but without the feedback. So we have Thursdays on the 1st and 3rd Thursdays, and again, the holidays are going to mess that up. No license required, and it's at Coldwell Banker on South Rock Boulevard in Reno, and I don't recall the address. 9 o'clock, And it usually lasts a couple hours, depending on how much stuff goes through there.
And you
So
said first and third?
First and third. And then for
Starts at 9, you said?
9 o'clock. And the second and fourth Thursdays, 9 o'clock, same time, same station, same place, is licensees.
Same place, right?
Yep, same place.
And you said it's South Rock in Reno?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's basically Rock and Longley almost.
Okay, gotcha.
So
I have no excuse for not making it.
probably in your backyard.
I just need to jump over the fence.
So, and if any of you have questions, don't hesitate to call it. Transaction to look at, and some research on. I'll be happy to give you my 2 cents.
Phone's gonna be ringing off the hook.
I hope there's that many deals that people are finding that many deals out there. And if you got a deal that looks like a great deal and you don't know what to do with it or can't figure out what to do with it, give me a call. I'm happy to pay commissions for licensed people and figure something out for unlicensed people. You can mow my lawn for a few $1,000s, you know.
Save on a maintenance fee so your APOD will look a little different there. So thank you, John. We really appreciate you coming and chatting with us. I didn't see any other questions in there. Doug said, John, is there anything you need from people? So is there anything that they can do for you?
Nothing I can think of, actually.
Besides your lawn.
Beside the lawn, yes. It takes me 4 or 5 minutes to do it. It's a big lawn. No, I can't think of anything right off. But thanks for asking. It was something I thought of before you asked the question.
Sorry.
And then it's gone. But, you know.
So that first document that you have, we didn't have it to share, so we'll send that out to all of you guys with the recording for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions further for John, definitely text or email him or call him. And I'm always here for you too. So if anyone wants to do a consultation, I do that at no cost. Yes.
I remembered.
Oh, yay.
Yay. No, anything. I've done a lot of teaching with the groups that I've been with. So if there's something that you would like to learn about, I'm happy to talk about options, 1031 exchanges. I've got a book that we can, in fact, it might not be a bad idea every meeting. It's 101 formulas, and it's different ways that exchangers, these formulas just come because you have a problem and you try and figure out a way to solve it. I just glanced at it. The first one in the book was the lemonade formula. And if you have, and this is, a lot of it's geared towards exchanging, but it works for buying stuff too. If you have, or if you're a realtor, if you've got a client that's got a difficult property, so let's say they got some fair land, market for, it isn't in a booming area, and it's worth $50,000. So that's the lemon. So how do we make lemonade out of it? Well, you add something that makes it sweeter. So what if I added an equal amount of cash to that to buy your whatever it is, your problem property? What if I use that as a down payment in cash to get into a Corvette that, you know, is worth $40,000 or $50,000. How about if I throw that in along with my land? In many cases, we use these, what we call mustangs. You want my, my building that's triple net leased?
Yeah.
I'm happy to sell it to you, but you must take my land. So there's just all kinds of formulas, and there's 101, there's more than that. 101 formulas, and only one of them is cash. 101 ways to buy property, and one is cash.
I love that.
So it might be interesting just take one or two of those at the beginning of the meeting.
I like that. We'll start implementing that.
There you go. But yeah, anybody else who's got an idea of a topic, I can speak even if I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so send me any topics that you guys think might be interesting to you. Like I said, we've got, there's my email. We have Ken Amundsen, just to remind you guys, coming the third Wednesday of the month in December. It will be a Zoom meeting again. The January one, I will just keep you aware and informed as far as that goes. What's the date in December, Anthony? Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. December 16th at 6 p.m. will be Ken Amundsen. And I was thinking for January, I don't know, maybe you guys can vote on that. We should have done a poll on that. I was thinking either a CPA or a lawyer in January, so right at the beginning. I don't know. What's your idea on that? That would be a good. Okay.
One that's familiar with, actually, we've got one that I use who does trusts and LLCs and all that. He's got, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he's still, whether he's still doing the presentation. He's spoken several times.
Okay. Well, maybe we can get his name and get him in here. And if you guys have any other ideas, definitely send me an email. We'd love to hear your ideas and then things that actually John can speak on. I like the 101 ideas on.
They're just called formulas.
Formulas.
But
101
but they were all
formulas.
created because somebody needed to solve a problem, and then you end up stacking formulas. So we do the, you know, the one formula, and then run it. That gets you so far, and then you work in the next formula.
I like it. Do you have any closing thoughts, John?
Have a great Thanksgiving, and hopefully we'll get rid of this COVID stuff pretty soon, so we can see each other face to face.
I love it. All right. We will see you guys next month. Be safe. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
By the way, anything that anybody has as far as a critique, something that you think would make it better.
I love it.
I can take it.
And I'll be sending out everyone who joined in for this Zoom. I have 2 investment properties that I'm going to share with you guys as a treat. And it's first come, first serve. So whoever's interested, one's a little bigger than the other. So just depend on what your comfort level is. I will be sending that out tomorrow morning. Thanks, you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Good night.
Good night, all.